영어 동화 세상 리틀팍스.
My life as a knight.
I am Sir Geoffrey, a knight of the royal court of England in the 12th century. The 12th century was the high Middle Ages, when noble men in shining armor ruled the land. My story is full of the adventures and glory that only a knight could have known. I spent years on the Second and Third Crusades, fighting to capture the city of Jerusalem. This city had been occupied for many years by Arab Muslims. So, in 1187, Pope Gregory VIII stated that all knights should ride across Europe to the Middle East and take the city. But before I could do that, I had to spend many years becoming a knight. I began my journey to knighthood as a page at the age of 7. I left home to live at the castle of a lord. As a page, I played many training games with other pages, such as wrestling, sword fighting, and lance practice. When we practiced sword and lance skills, we used wooden weapons to be safe. My other lessons involved the lady and lord of the castle. I would spend the day serving my lord in all things. If his armor was rusted or dirty, it was my job to clean it. My lord taught me how to hunt, usually with a bow and arrow, but also with a hawk. The lady of the castle showed me how to be a gentleman by teaching me good manners. This was very important because a knight is not only a warrior, but a noble person who always does what is right. Another big part of my day involved learning about God and religion. This was important because many knights, including myself, were deeply religious Christians. When I was 14, I was chosen to become a squire, a knight's servant or apprentice. A squire takes care of the knight's weapons and carries them for him. In battle, the squire quickly replaces any damaged shield or armor, so the knight can continue fighting. During my time as a squire, I learned the ways of combat and warfare from my lord. Now, instead of training with wooden weapons, the other squires and I use real ones. We studied siege warfare, or how to surround and blockade a city, and the art of commanding soldiers. As squires, we became expert horsemen. We learned to ride horses and fight at the same time. We also practiced fighting while wearing heavy armor. Sometimes during a battle, we were allowed to fight alongside our lord instead of just serving him. A squire could become a knight between the ages of 18 and 20. When I was thought worthy of becoming a knight, I did everything a squire must do just before a knighting ceremony. I prayed throughout the night, refusing to eat or sleep. When morning came, I took a warm bath and put on a special padded vest and hood. Next, I put on my full armor, which was well polished and shiny. Over this armor, I put a fine white tunic or shirt. White was the color of purity. I was finally ready to be knighted, or dubbed a knight. For the ceremony, I knelt before my lord, and I received my sword, my lance, and golden spurs. I recited a special oath, or promise, to be loyal and obey him in all things. I also took the oath of chivalry, to protect the weak and defenseless, defend the church, speak the truth, respect women, and live an honorable life. Then the lord performing the ceremony touched me on the shoulders with a sword and said, "I dub thee, Sir Knight." I had knelt as a squire, but I rose as a knight. As a knight, I was free to travel, but I always had to be available for my lord in both peace and in war. But most of the time, before I went on the Crusades, I fought in tournaments. Tournaments were very common events that allowed knights to compete against each other in combat with swords and lances. Even though the competitions were games, they were very dangerous and many knights died. These events could determine a knight's fortune, since knights often bet their wealth on a tournament. To be beaten was to lose money and reputation. To win was to gain wealth and fame. After the Crusades, I eventually returned to England. I continued to participate in tournaments and fight wars to gain land and money. I even taught my own pages and squires, as I had been taught. When I look back on my life, I am proud to say that I was a true knight, performed my duties well, and fought for my beliefs.
My life as a pioneer woman teacher.
My name is Elizabeth Willard, and I am a 22-year-old teacher. I graduated from the Hartford Female Seminary in Connecticut, one of the first schools in America that trains female teachers. In 1854, I began teaching in the new territory of Kansas, an area located in the middle of the United States. There are many teaching jobs in the West because many whites have been settling here from the East. New frontier towns have popped up everywhere. My teacher training started when I was 20, and I learned spelling, mathematics, and music. Before graduation, my classmates and I were invited to teach out west when we completed our studies. Some teaching students accepted the offer, and I was one of them. We trained for frontier life by carrying pails of water and chopping firewood. We needed to be tough to face the many hardships ahead. When we graduated, a school committee gave us our teaching posts, and I was assigned to a school in Kansas. All the teachers traveled west in the spring, and since it was unsafe for women to travel alone, my father went with me. First, we rode on horseback for 2 weeks, about 800 kilometers, from Hartford, Connecticut to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Then we took a steamboat down the Ohio River from Pittsburgh through the states of Ohio and Kentucky. After 12 days, we arrived in Old Shawneetown, Illinois, and from there I took a stagecoach on my own. After 10 days and another 800 kilometers, I arrived at my final destination, Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. Suddenly, I was alone in a strange town, and I had nowhere to stay. So I went to the schoolhouse. With so few trees for lumber on the prairie, sod and dirt had been used to build the small school rather than wood. There was only one room and 2 windows. The bathroom was outside, and a little fence wrapped around the schoolyard. Some of the town's children came by to see me. One little girl named Abby said I would be staying with her family. Boarding around or staying in students' homes is common for frontier teachers. I would have to help Abby's family with the chores, but I was happy to accept their offer. Boarding helps me save money since I make only $150 a year, half the salary of a male teacher. Most of my students live on farms, so the school year must fit between the fall harvest and the spring planting. During my first year, the class size varied from 3 to 25 children. Some of the children do farm work and other chores and cannot attend every day. My students' ages range from 4 to 20 years old. In my classroom, I have a small desk up front, and my students sit on benches in rows. There is one blackboard, and we have no books except for a Bible. Sometimes the children bring in old newspapers or magazines from home. We have no paper supplies, so my students write their lessons on flat rocks called slates. They write with a soft piece of rock called a slate pen. Most of my students behave well in class, but sometimes I have to punish them. If a child talks during a lesson, I put a whispering stick in his or her mouth. This is a small wooden stick that is held in place by a piece of cloth that I tie around the student's head. The child is forced to bite on the stick and cannot speak. Sometimes, if a student never knows the correct answer to a question, I put a pointy hat on their head with the word dunce written on it. When a student wears the dunce cap, it means he or she is not very smart. My first winter was very hard. The temperature sometimes dropped to minus 23 degrees Celsius. The snow started falling in November and did not stop until April. The only heat we had was a pot-bellied stove in the classroom, and it was smoky and hard to light. I'd arrive at school early to chop firewood for the whole day. Children close to the stove would get too hot. Others in the back of the room almost froze. It was so cold that my students' lunches of dried fruit and salted meat would sometimes freeze. Some children became sick and died during the year. We all were happy when spring finally arrived. I am now at the end of my first year, and I am very lonely. When I took this job, I promised not to marry for 2 years so I could devote myself to my students. In my free time, I sew quilts and patch my clothes. I go to church and visit the friends I have met there. I have heard that some teachers have already gone home because the life out here is too difficult. But I would like to stay on for another year. I have grown to love my students and the progress we all have made.
My life as a Pullman Porter. My name is Frank Davis. The year is 1926, and I'm a Pullman Porter. In 1865, a white man named George Pullman created a company that makes luxury sleeping cars for trains. Like a first-class hotel on wheels, each Pullman car has marble sinks, fine carpeting, and crystal lights. Many railroad companies include these luxury cars in their trains because people love to be pampered. In fact, Pullman Porters are called ambassadors of hospitality because we always try to please the passengers in any way we can. Being a porter is one of the few good jobs a black man can get. Usually, the Pullman Company hires black men aged 25 to 40 years old who have a high school education, but some of the porters are college graduates. In fact, a few porters I work with have graduated from law and medical school. My uncle, who got me my job, said that 30% of all black doctors were once porters. You see, it's against the law in a lot of places for whites and blacks to work or socialize together. Because of this segregation, hospitals won't hire black doctors, so they work as porters to save enough money to open their own medical offices in black neighborhoods. If a young man wants to be a Pullman Porter, he has to be recommended by a respected member of the black community, such as a preacher or a businessman. The Pullman Company really likes to hire people who have relatives that have been porters, because then the company knows the new porter already understands that the company is very strict, almost like the military. That's why Pullman Porter jobs tend to run in families, from generation to generation. My uncle has been a porter for 40 years, and my father was one too before he died a few years ago. New porters are given a rule book that must be followed faithfully. This book contains instructions for everything a porter does. In fact, every new porter has to pass a written test that proves he knows the rules. For instance, there's only one way to make a bed, the Pullman way. The sleeping cars have upper and lower beds called berths, which look a lot like built-in bunk beds. The lower berth is a seat during the day, and the upper berth pulls out from the ceiling at night. Getting the berths ready for people to sleep in is very difficult. I have to fold down the seats, hang curtains for privacy, put up a headboard, and make up the bed, all in 3 to 5 minutes. Some older porters can do it in 90 seconds. It's very important to do everything exactly right, and I still carry the 50-page rule book in my hip pocket to make sure I can always refer to it when I need to. When I was first hired, an older porter taught me everything I needed to know. He accompanied me at all times on my first train trips to make sure I knew how to properly fold the blankets and towels, dispose of dirty laundry, and wear my uniform. He even taught me how to gently wake the passengers by shaking the privacy curtains instead of knocking on the edge of the berth. I learned quickly, and my paycheck was $16 for working 73 hours my first week. The average pay for white men is about $19 a week for a lot fewer hours. But a black man is still lucky to have a job like this. Being a porter can be a demanding job. Porters are so famous for keeping everything spotless that a magazine once said that Pullman cars are cleaner than most homes in the United States. The job is more than just cleaning up, making beds, and folding laundry, though. If there aren't enough waiters in the dining room, I put on a white jacket and serve food. I help with luggage, clean the bathrooms, and teach the passengers about train safety. Porters cut hair, deliver drinks, iron clothes, and do almost everything they're asked. One day, a passenger ripped the seat of his pants, and he didn't have another pair. So I cut some material from a black umbrella and sewed it over the tear. The man said it was the best sewing job he'd ever seen. Most of the passengers are nice and friendly, but sometimes a few of them can be a real problem, which makes a porter's job much harder. Some men will get into their berths with a cigarette and make a big mess with the ashes. Other men, we call them whitewashers, spread shaving cream all over the sink when they shave. Then there are the fussy ladies who never stop ringing the bell to complain about something. What makes it really difficult is that porters are never allowed to go off duty when they're on the train. We try to catch a few hours sleep at night, but if we're needed for anything, we have to get up right away. Believe me, it's very tiring to work around the clock. Every night, all the porters get together to shine shoes in the smoking room after we've collected the shoes from boxes outside the passengers' berths. When the people are asleep and no one is listening, we talk about the union, the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters. It's the first black union in the United States, and some porters think that if we join the union, the company will treat us better. The union wants every porter to be paid more money and insists that we get at least 3 hours of sleep each night. But I worry that the company will find out I'm a union member and fire me. Being a Pullman porter has made the lives of my wife and son easier, and I'm very thankful for that. But I hope my little boy will have a chance to study and become whatever he wants in life. I didn't have that opportunity, but maybe he will.